I love Persona 5. I played about 100 hours of the game and I would do it again in a heartbeat. This game is one of my favorites of all time. And whether this is a good or bad thing, this game changed my life. I absolutely recommend this game to anyone who has the spare time for it. But what if you don't have the time for it? Again, this game takes at least 100 hours. What if you have a job, a family? Let's be real, you don't. But let's just imagine we don't have the time. Well, look no further to Persona 5 the animation. The anime that revisits the events of its console counterpart. I really wanted to see how much this anime that has only about 10 hours of content compared to the game and vice versa. But before we continue, how about you consider subscribing? It's free and I'll become one of your confidants. If you don't know what that means, I'll explain later. And if you're really into me and can't wait in between videos, check out the second channel where we do a bunch of goofing around, a lot of tomfoolery, a ton of chicanery. But that's it, I won't hold you up anymore. Some of you have probably clicked on this video not even knowing what a Persona game is. And let me fill you in because I've been waiting to do this since the video started. Persona 5 is about you, the self-insert protagonist, being sent away to a new school for stopping an assault. While he's attending school, him and his soon-to-be friend Ryuji get sucked into what's called the metaverse and find an alternative version of reality. This is where the protagonist awakens his persona. And what is a persona, you might ask? I actually don't know. Let me look it up real fast. A persona is a physical manifestation of a person's psyche and subconscious used for combat. The TLDR, persona is someone's special emotion powers.
Yeah. Rip me out of the Amazon box, I'll be feeling brand new.
Personas awaken when the characters pull off their masks and realize that they're in dire need of its power. Once the protagonist unlocks their persona, he slowly gathers confidants, and they do the same. Confidants are the people throughout the story who aid Joker in his mission or just provide useful perks throughout the game. Each of them have their own story to go along with them, but I will get into that a bit later. The group eventually expands with the goal of stealing hearts. That's basically rewriting a person's brain in order to change how they think, usually from a negative way to a positive, or at least a remorseful way of thinking. And that is the most simplified version of Persona 5 for babies. I hope you're still following because things are going to get a whole lot more complicated. If you're ready, hit the subscribe button. We're going to keep going. Today, like I said, we're talking about the Persona 5 anime, and it tells the story of the game in the most concise way possible. And to be fair, a lot of Persona is you doing dumb stuff like school clubs, or laundry, or outside activities, and this pacing even shows in the first episode. The first 5 minutes of the anime is basically the first 20 minutes of the game. Despite only being the first episode, I already have a very big gripe with the series. I think the biggest problem I have with the show isn't necessarily its fault, but the main character Joker is a self-insert character. So a majority of the game is you talking to these characters through preset dialogue. There's enough variety to make it seem like you're actually talking to someone through the game. Sometimes I even found myself having the same exact reaction and picking the dialogue that perfectly captures my outbursts. Having said this, I think that this is part of the appeal for Persona games, the very deep level of immersion. Now Joker, well in this case Ren, has his own personality. By the way, in the anime his name is Ren, so if you call him Akira because that's what it says in the manga, consider yourself an op. I think because Joker is now an actual character rather than just you, it makes some of the stuff in the anime a bit more underwhelming. And I think the simplest example is when Joker gets arrested. This is one of the events that plays out so much slower in the game because of the tutorial. But once you get to the cell, the game allows you to start making decisions, and each of those decisions have different dialogue. This is relatively simple, but it makes you feel like you're having your own playthrough. There's so much more tension in this scene in the game because you're talking. The interrogators are asking for your name. It's very deliberate, but extremely effective in immersing you completely once you get to this point in the game. But in the animation, this scene isn't nearly as good. I think that the scene fails at having that tension from the start because in my eyes, Joker from Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal are different characters from Persona 5 the animation. And that's the problem with having a mute character, is that you put yourself into the shoes of that character, and so when someone else characterizes this character, it won't make anybody happy. And again, most of it is because you're changing mediums, so it's not fair to compare an anime medium to a medium that is way more hands-on. And to put it even simpler, I think that we get Ren Amamiya versus the self-insert. And Ren is a fucking dork. Like, he just comes off as a bumbling moron sometimes. And he sounds so nervous compared to the Sigma King self-insert. In the game, if you took it with any amount of seriousness, Joker is the cool, level-headed leader that anyone on the team can depend on. Ren, on the other hand, will say some of the exact same things, but he kind of drops the ball with how much he talks. It's like, shut up, oh my gosh. One scene I really liked in the anime is when Joker was finally able to talk to An about Kamoshida. Kamoshida is the first villain, if you don't know, and he was caught grooming and abusing kids. So, there's that. But when An was talking, Joker barely said anything and just let her vent, which was a really good scene in general. And I think it was just as good, if not identical, to the actual game. But whoa, too much positivity. Now here's some minor nitpicks to balance it out. The texting back and forth, I know they show it multiple times, it's abysmal. It looks terrible. The animation also has some of the visual effects as the game, and I think it's executed kind of poorly. Usually when you get one of the little eye things, you get a critical hit from the enemy's weakness. It's a flashy indicator to show one of those things happened. Now, why would I need to know if Joker hit a critical hit when I'm watching the anime? Like, he hit a fucking volleyball, you telling me he had the right element for that? Now, I do like that we get to see the daily school things that we really don't get to see in the game. Like I said, we saw Joker playing volleyball. Most of the time, the main characters are just standing around, kind of talking around the school or something. That's something I think Persona 5 kind of lacks. I don't remember being able to join any clubs, really. In Persona 3 Reload, you're kind of encouraged to go and see what the school has to offer and be an actual student. Sometimes I find myself having to choose between certain people because I know I only have so much time in the day. Who do I spend my time with? What club should I join? You can forget that Joker's a student sometimes, not just some grown man roaming the city. Another thing I do like about the series is how things are contextualized for the medium. My point here is the fighting. I've always wondered how these characters would be fighting in the context of an RPG. Like, it's slow paced for us, of course, because of the gameplay style, but to the characters, what does that look like? We of course got the answer, and I gotta say, it does look pretty cool. One thing I do think it loses as context is the palace exploration. Of course, you can spend hours upon hours exploring these palaces, and it really gives Persona 5 that personality. The game wouldn't be nearly as enticing if the palaces weren't as complex and well thought out by the devs. Since we only get 24 minutes per episode, and honestly it takes 24 minutes to get through the first stakeout for each palace, it's a real shame that you can't really dive into the nice areas, do the cool puzzles, or hear the witty banter between the Phantom Thieves. Unfortunately, these things do have to go in order to make pace for the other important things in the show, like the boss fights. And let's talk about the boss fights. They feel really anticlimactic, especially with how quick they come and go. The first boss, Kamoshida, plays out pretty identically to the game, but in this, I don't know, it just doesn't feel the same without you at the helm. They did an all-out attack with the fight with Kamoshida, and I was hyped and disappointed at the same time. Hyped because I recognized it from the game and it looks really cool whenever I'm able to get it. Disappointed because it looked kind of weird in the anime. I think it works in the game because the game is trying to mimic an actual anime watching experience. The best way I could describe it is that it's physically playing out an episode of an anime, and it's trying to give you the closest representation possible. So when the anime does it, it's like it's trying to copy anime tropes, you know? They've made an anime about an anime-inspired game. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the Confidants. Confidants, aka Joker's buddies, all have optional stories to go with them. They're completely optional, but you do get bonus perks when you do them, which is a nice incentive for you to do it. I didn't realize this until about 90 hours in, and I realized that all my hangouts with An were a bunch of wasted time, but in the animation, we're only able to see the payoff, which in my opinion, is still pretty good. I think it goes to show that in any medium, these side stories for the Confidants are just well written. Watching Yusuke talk to Joker about making his art in order to make the world a better place, and actually grasping what his mother's message was, felt really somber, and I honestly really enjoyed it. Of course, I didn't think they were gonna cover the Confidant stories because of how long they take, and on top of them being optional, but I'm happy they did decide to include what they could. And although they decided to go all in on the narrative, I just have to say it, this anime is kinda ugly. None of the characters look like they're clean, pristine PNG cutouts on the game, but what can you do? I think they did their best trying to incorporate that Persona 5 spunk into the anime, but I feel like it ends up feeling a bit more janky than anything, but I commend the effort. The best thing this series does have is its soundtrack, which is completely pulled from the game. I really didn't care for Persona 5 the animation because I feel like it had a lot to live up to. A lot of the problems stem from the change of medium from video game to anime, so I don't really hate the show because it looks like a team tried their best to give us an alternate way to enjoy Persona 5. This is no supplement for playing the actual game. In fact, I highly recommend that you play the game yourself to really understand the differences between the two and how much of a better experience that it is. Persona 5 the animation isn't an irredeemable or unwatchable experience, but I don't think you'd like it much if you already played the game. But if you're trying to get into the series, honestly, this is a great start. Now I'm gonna play Persona 3 Reload, and Fuuka is on top. If you don't think so, you're a fucking idiot.